So just a few days ago, we got it reported in that Amy Cooper will be charged with filing a police report. Now, you might remember Amy Cooper as Central Park Karen, the lady who, called the police against an African American man for simply asking her to put her dog on the leash, which, by the way, were the rules anyway. And so this has set off a fascinating debate, a debate that I think is very fascinating among leftists, debating about whether or not it is truly right to charge her. Now, I have a different opinion. My opinion is a little bit different than what this particular person is arguing, but I want to read you all the tweet that set off the argument. So you can see here, this is the tweet thread, and I'm going to read through most of this whole thread, and then we're going to talk about it. Chris and I are going to talk about it. So you can see here at the beginning, and by the way, a little bit of background on her. She has been working in prison abolition basically her entire life. Basically her life work is getting shorter prison sentences, usually for African Americans and other minorities, but she is a prison abolitionist overall. And so this is her tweet thread talking about this, and again, it was pretty controversial among the left. So let's go through and read it. So you can see here, quote, "We don't have to charge Amy Cooper, and we shouldn't charge Amy Cooper. Charging her is the easy solution. It's the easy way out, and it reinforces the idea that justice can only be found in the disastrous criminal justice system that we've created. It's hard to sit with the idea that someone like Amy Cooper shouldn't be charged because we are constantly so she said constantly twice, convinced that this is the system through which justice is done. But I urge you to sit with it. Ask yourself what criminal charges can do to Amy Cooper that has not already been done. Has she not already faced consequences? She did something absolutely horrible, and she lost her job for it, and she lost her dog. Her personal businesses were on the front page, and we all know her face and her story. This is not unreasonable. As a white woman, she tried to weaponize the system against a black man the best way she knew how. But the question for you is, why do you think that to be indicted or to be arrested or to serve time, that you need to serve time to, quote, really face the consequences? What are the consequences to you? Sit with it, my love, sit with it. I know it doesn't feel good. I know it doesn't feel like justice, but our most inherent feelings about what feels like justice have been shaped, molded, and corrupted by a criminal justice system we still have a lot of trouble shaking." And then she basically goes on to talk about what Amy Cooper did was absolutely terrible and other things, but you generally get the point of her argument there. She's essentially saying that we shouldn't charge Amy Cooper, and basically because the criminal justice system is rotten, and so we shouldn't try to conflate justice with this idea of the criminal justice system. Now, obviously, again, leftists are really divided by this. Some people argue that absolutely we have to charge Amy Cooper because what she did was just so wrong that she needs to serve some kind of jail time for it. But she's asking us, well, why should we conflate jail time with consequences? Chris, first, sort of, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so this is one of those issues where even when I first read this for the first second, I thought, oh, well, it's obvious. But then when you kind of start to dig into the nuances of it, you can see there's a lot more to this than immediately meets the eye. So, you can make a couple of what I would call reasonable arguments for both sides of this. You could argue, I think it could be argued that she's already undergone quite a bit of consequences for her actions, which, when you look at what she did, was pretty despicable. There probably should be some kind of consequences. But I also do get the point that's being made here, which is a point that I'm definitely sympathetic to, which is, does it make sense for our justice system to just be solely based on punishment, right? It's just about handing out punishment. And is that even effective? That's why many other countries have different types of prison systems where they aren't just throw someone in a cell and treat them horribly for 5 years. You try to rehabilitate that person, which seems to be largely missing from our judicial system for many reasons. So I kind of get the point. She's already gone tremendous consequences for what she did. But at the same time, those were just social consequences, right? It wasn't part of our current criminal justice system. And if you if you break the law, you, in some sense, in some way, and we can argue about what level she should be charged with, but there probably should be some sort of consequences. But I get the idea, right? I'm on the side of people who say, well, we need to be reforming that criminal justice system so that maybe we're seeing different outcomes. So I can see the argument on both sides, but I do kind of think, well, she did break the law, and she did it in a way which very likely could have been endangering that man, right? And there's a lot of history about that kind of thing going on. So it does seem like something that we would like to see stopped in society. And if you let stuff pass, are you doing what you can to stop it? I don't know.
Right. I
I
mean,
don't know.
what Amy Cooper did was terrible. I mean, it was absolutely racist. I mean, she's calling basically a hit job for any African American man from the police who's in the park anywhere, saying, "Oh, well, there's an African
Right.
American man threatening me. You know, the police are going to come in and just go for any African American." I mean, terrible. I mean, absolutely racist. So that sort of what you're saying there kind of leads into kind of how I feel about this, because here's the thing. Like, I agree with her that the criminal justice system is terrible and the prison system is not a solution for crime. Like, in principle, right? Like, I think that we can do our prisons a lot better. We can do, criminal justice system a lot better. But I also don't feel comfortable leaving everything to public arbitration. Like, she uses as the argument the social consequences, which came the public prosecution. But see, public prosecution is just arbitrary. There's a lot of things that,
Right.
like, Amy Cooper could have done that, and if it wasn't caught on camera, there wouldn't have been public prosecution, right? So I'm
Right.
also not necessarily comfortable in sitting here saying that, well, we can't just we can't oh well, it's okay to just ignore things because there was a social prosecution. Then it becomes what if there's a clone of Amy Cooper that does this, say, in a month from now, but then isn't videotaped. The exact same situation occurs, except this Christian Cooper clone decided to not record. The situation is exactly the same. Well, then that would be a situation where, according to her logic there that she's using to say that, well, she's already faced consequences, then you would be in a situation where that person would then go to the criminal justice system. Now, of course, that wouldn't be the exact argument that she would make. She would still say that, look, I just don't support the criminal justice system, and but like, you get my point here, that we can't just rely on public prosecution. It's too arbitrary, and that's precisely the reason why we
Right.
need to have some kind of rule of law. But that said, it becomes an issue of reforming the law. It becomes an issue of, well, so I don't agree with jail, as it's currently
Right.
conceived as a kind of punishment. So we have to talk about another solution. And actually, if you go into the Twitter thread, there are a lot of leftists proposing solutions. Like, maybe she should, have to serve community service to some
Right.
African American organization or some organization determined by the court, and that can serve as her punishment. Serving, maybe like, a month's worth of community service every day or something like that, as opposed to a month in jail. That could be a lot more productive, and that maybe she could even actually learn from something
Right.
like that. And by the way, actually, there is some interesting studies to back up those kinds of things, that actually, like, when it comes to community service to, minority, like, as a response to racial crimes, that actually,
Right.
getting them directly involved in communities of minorities. You might think, well, you don't want any racists around, and obviously, you need to have a transition period, and there's, things like that. But actually, getting them to interact can actually reduce, make it so that kind of thing doesn't happen again. So it's
Right.
an interesting dynamic, and it's hard to tell exactly what should go on. But I am in absolute agreement with her that the criminal justice system, Chris, is completely broken.
Yeah, and I don't see her doing jail time anyways, right? She'll probably, we'll see where it goes, but I don't think she's going to end up in jail. But let's just say it was a jailable offense. I mean, I don't see, if you throw in her cell, there's essentially zero chance that she's going to learn anything about the situation. But and my first reaction was kind of what you suggested, which is, if you put her in a situation where at least hopefully there's a chance of some kind of personal growth, where she's maybe understanding what it was like for that man that she was yelling at, maybe trying to understand what that felt like for him in that kind of situation. Something like you were saying, community service, put her in there. Maybe she'll start to think about someone else's perspective on the issue, and then maybe learn, maybe have some growth out of that.
Right, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's the thing I want most. I'm not, one of those people who think, well, someone did something bad, so they've got to absolutely be punished for that thing. Like, that's my impulse when I first read a terrible story, and it
Yeah.
definitely makes me mad, and I want to see, well, you need to be punished, and sometimes I struggle with, controlling those sort of outbursts of emotion. But, I oftentimes do, once I calm down from reading something, I think, well, really what we want is to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Really what I want
Yeah.
is to like I think that things wrong, and ultimately, like, what do you want whenever someone like wrongs you? You don't always just want punishment. You also kind of want them to recognize that they
Right.
wronged you. Like, you want both of those things. And sometimes, and this is something that is really difficult for people to acknowledge, and I found even in my own life is difficult to acknowledge, but sometimes those two things are mutually exclusive. That, getting someone to have punishment for, having
Right.
wronged you, and also acknowledging that they wronged you, sometimes those things are mutually exclusive and you can't have both. And it becomes a question of what's better, at least on a societal level. And so while I don't entirely agree with everything that she's tweeting there that you saw there, I think that, at least, Chris, the general tone, the idea which she's gesturing towards, has some truth in it. Am I right in that, or am I wrong?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely nuances here, and this is definitely not a like a a completely clear issue. There's definitely some middle ground here to listen to both sides of the argument. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely a little bit of middle ground. We've got to listen to the sides. We've got to dialogue and try to think about it. And, no matter what side you end up coming down on, we can't just do it by knee jerk reaction. We have to think about it. And that's the hard work of democratic politics. All right, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Guys, make sure to go check out Chris's channel. It's Political Perspective. He's got some great stuff going on. And you can find a link down there in the description. You can open up the description if you're on mobile. Just scroll down to the description part, tap on it, and then you'll see a link there, and then tap on it again. I'm explaining to you how to navigate your own phone, but do that stuff. All right, we'll see you all in the next one.